This is SG2 Perspectives, a conversation with SG2 experts and industry thought leaders about the biggest trends in healthcare and what we expect that's going to mean for the future of healthcare delivery.
Health systems really need to view, specifically for the oncology space, precision oncology as a strategic differentiator, not something that's going to erode your traditional revenue makers, like what's going to happen in the OR or surgery or whatnot, but as something that is going to improve the patient experience and outcomes.
Welcome to SG2 Perspectives. I'm your host, Trevor DaRin. I have an expert panel of three great colleagues, Justin Cassidy, Andrew Rebhan, and Marlatt, because we're going to talk about a broad topic, precision medicine, and they're each going to bring their unique lens to that. Justin, I'm going to ask you maybe the toughest question today, maybe it's the easiest. What's precision medicine? Give us a definition. What are we going to be talking about today?
That's actually the toughest question. It has been perennially. Since we started covering at SG2, we had a series of webinars, and some of them were centered just on how to define. It's a really simple definition, using big data to deliver better care.
Kara, Andrew, any tweaks, adjustments, additions, subtractions from that definition for today?
Oftentimes we get hung up on the definition of precision medicine, but it resonates with a lot of our members a little bit more if we say personalized medicine. And then it is that trigger for them to know that that's actually what we do in a lot of senses already. I would switch it up and say personalized medicine is this individualized, tailor approach to disease treatment, where we take into account a lot of different factors, but it's really a person's genetics that help to best treat the person instead of just thinking of individuals as a one-size-fits-all model.
The only other way I would phrase it is we're moving from a healthcare of averages to a healthcare that's more of an N of one model. And so there's different ways to spell that out. So Kara mentioned genetics, there's our clinical record, there's the context we live in, the environments, our lifestyle, all of that packaged together. That's ultimately what we're talking about.
I don't really hear members using the phrase precision medicine. Yeah, maybe personalized medicine a little more, but it is increasingly embedded in so many of the things that we're doing. Is this already embedded within some of the normal things health systems are doing? Is this outside of normal service lines? Is this really only happening in a few elite centers? Justin, give us a little bit of the landscape.
Folks aren't talking about it because this is yesterday's buzzword. And I would argue that the clinical use of AI is actually the tool of precision medicine. And we're seeing and hearing a lot about this. It's just different terms to describe the same type of activity. The idea of using everything and anything about a patient that you can garner and patients like that patient in order to segment them into different clinically relevant subtypes that are more or less likely to respond to a specific type of targeted treatment. Now, every disease has subtypes. And you can think about diabetes, type 1, type 2. There's a lot of different subtypes of type 2 even. Underlying causes of most diseases. We're hearing a lot about autism lately, dementia, pain, obesity. There is not one molecular cause, but many. And this is what needs to be figured out in order to have an effective therapeutic approach. This spans service lines, although the deployment and use usually depends upon individual clinical champions and organizations. Clearly, cancer leads the charge, and essentially every cancer center has some degree of precision medicine in their approach. You don't hear so much about it because the adoption is very broad and integrates into existing workflows.
With oncology being such a leader in this space, anything that we see in the landscape of molecular profiling, a lot of this really drives therapy choice and selection and could even drive like trial eligibility and how we manage patients on different therapies. This is something where we're not just seeing this at academic medical centers. Like at academic medical centers, the use of omics, like genomics and transcriptomics and proteomics and all those sort of things that can customize the way we deliver care to patients. That's something that has been around, but a lot of community centers are using some third-party vendors to try and deliver some of these personalized medicine tactics. We are seeing it pick up more in the community setting. This also just resonates with what patients really want from their providers. I was on site with a member a couple of weeks ago, and all the patients were saying, I want you to recognize me as me. And this is part of that whole connection. We're trying to get away from an average into like an N of one, and how can we more so personalize care?
From my perspective, covering digital health, we've often talked about this in different ways. In some sense, precision medicine might already be here. We've been talking about it for a number of years, but it's definitely unevenly distributed depending on what kind of client or stakeholder we're talking to. in the space of digital health, a lot of it is based on just the amount of data that we can get around a patient. And that's related to everything that happens well beyond just the clinical encounter. Can we start to track them increasingly in their home environment, in their community? Can we track their nutrition, their sleep quality, their mental health, all these other factors that constitute the status of patient health? It's a lot easier said than done. And certainly the large AMCs, research-based institutions, they're often leading the charge on studying the possibilities of precision medicine. When you start to move into some of the smaller sized organizations, community health centers, they're doing it, but in select ways. They're working within the bounds of their resources and their technology investment to make this a reality. The idea has been formulating for quite a long time, whether it's even thinking about something like social determinants of health. People are now talking about integrative care or integrative medicine, these new approaches to care that all speak to the same thing, just from different angles.
We're SG2, we're forecasters at heart. If you play this out, are we talking about way more precise therapeutics that can replace surgeries? Is that like an existential problem for hospital-dependent health systems? Sorry to go doom and gloom or huge scope question. Kara, what do you think?
This is something that we tackle all the time from just an oncology perspective. Historically, growth opportunities are not just for the overall health system, but just oncology specifically. It's relied on a lot of these hospital-based intensive care procedures, thinking surgery, OR usage, radiation. Those are often very mechanical in nature. While those are really going to still remain integral to the types of treatments that we provide in the cancer space, precision medicine has been able to emphasize or enhance diagnostics and more targeted therapeutics, things like next generation sequencing, maybe molecular residual disease testing, and even cell and gene therapies. And so thinking about how that shift actually happens. So that's a long-winded way of saying, in some instances, yes, there could be a shift, and we might reserve surgeries for certain cases, and maybe fewer resections might occur. But that doesn't mean surgeries are going to go away. I want to ask Justin what he thinks here, because we hear this question quite a bit with the introduction of GLP-1s versus bariatric surgery. We hear all the time health systems are worried about combination GLP-1 therapies are going to erode bariatric volumes. There's a time and a place for those conversations.
Absolutely, there is a risk of some therapeutics or medicines replacing surgical procedures. And Kara, I'm glad you brought up bariatric surgery. It's an excellent example. Now, GLP-1s don't work for everyone. Bariatric surgery is still an excellent care option, incredibly safe. Payers are on board, improves quality of life, and reduces comorbidity in patients that receive it. So you certainly don't want to downplay its importance, but GLP-1s are much more accessible and taking a chunk out of a lot of those procedural volumes in the short term. So this is already happening. I'll point to other examples of this sort of medical supplantation of surgical procedures. We're seeing at academic medical centers, acute appendicitis, instead of being treated with appendectomy with the antimicrobial agents, that's a cheap option compared to a surgical procedure. This clearly might not be adopted by other systems that require that cross-subsidization to keep their program solvent. From a precision medicine perspective, it's the changing the channels and referral streams that's going to be the most long-lasting. This is an enhanced diagnostic activity. The example here I'd point to is the potential replacement of cancer screening procedures, colonoscopy, low-dose CT scans, mammography, even with blood-based tests. We just saw some recent blood-based tests for colorectal cancer screening being approved. This is going to be the norm moving forward. Have multiple different types of diagnostic options for patients. Now, proceduralists balk at this. Health systems clearly still referring. There's clearly very long wait times for these screening procedures still. But when it hits, and it's going to be a game changer for those channels. Might save payers money by avoiding procedures, but could potentially draw more patients into a cancer program or other types of advanced care.
With this onset of these new cancer screening technologies that are coming on board, in terms of cost, we're going to have to think through as health systems, if we screen everybody, that is going to increase the cost of overall cancer screening. And so what does that mean for health systems as a whole with costs? And then what does that look like for reimbursement and even regulation? All great points.
From the digital health lens, Trevor, you asked about the impact of therapeutics and the potential impact of surgery. the role of technology centering around data, increasingly more around the predictive analytic functions and improved diagnostics, and how this can really start to help us be more proactive in terms of how we reach out to patients and help them before their care needs escalate. Beyond that, in the digital therapeutic space itself, we do see a number of organizations that are starting to leverage a means of connected devices, smartphones, other things that are readily accessible for consumers to essentially track more of their data in this way. I think of something like a virtual musculoskeletal care clinic, where we are starting to see through different surveys and research how these are leading to significant reductions in pain scores, the need for surgery. This is saving on costs. This is also helping those patients to manage symptoms around anxiety or depression that they may be having when they're dealing with chronic pain. There are these windows we're seeing where digital therapeutics are playing a role in improving our approach to precision medicine. The biggest question, though, is often the economics of the model and how they're reimbursed. There's still a lot of roadblocks on that pathway.
Good answers as expected. Carrie, you mentioned cancer is probably further along than most other medical disciplines in this space. Do we have a prediction of where we think there's opportunities for growth in other service lines?
If I were thinking through the excitement that's in the cancer space, what we look at in terms of how we're going to forecast the next year is that we're really tracking things that are even still in the experimental phase. So like the multi-cancer early detection tests or something that we track that really can transform or has the potential to transform cancer screening. So there's a lot of excitement there. And for those that might be unfamiliar with that space, this is a blood or fluid test that analyzes a lot of circulating factors that are tumor derived, and it sets off this more or less cancer signal that can then be triggered to identify like the zone of where that cancer might be. It sounds like this lofty way of describing it, but there's some definite potential in what this could become. But as far as right now is concerned, there's low sensitivity for some early stage cancers. And so when you think about where these screenings could be impactful, the early stage cancers would be where it would be the most impactful. We still have a little bit to come in this space, but we're also tracking things like personalized vaccines and immunomodulators. When you think of sequencing a patient's tumor, we can select different targets and then manufacture a personalized vaccine for folks. This is something that is exciting, but it's very much still in the early trial stages, and it's often in combination with immunotherapies. We're going to have to weigh cost, reimbursement, and regulation and how that follows after the fact.
What will be the next wave of services that catch up after cancer? And there's thinking like broad spectrum. An area the science is incredibly solid is something called pharmacogenomics. And this field suffers because it's a mouthful to pronounce, which has hindered its adoption. Strategic leaders just don't want to sound stupid, perhaps mispronouncing this word. It sounds silly, but we found that words in marketing matter. Essentially, this is the use of a person's genes to reveal if they will respond well or terribly to a given medication. You can essentially use genetic sequencing to predict whether patients will metabolize a given drug very rapidly or very slowly. And this affects then the relative dosing and, of course, efficacy of pharmacological treatment. We're seeing that pharmacy leaders are essentially building these programs at many institutions. They're incredibly impactful. All of us will benefit from pharmacogenomic testing if we did have it in our EHR. We're all going to be receiving some medication or over-the-counter medicine or even a supplement that would be impacted by these metabolic differences. Surely as we age, there's an even more compounding issue. And when folks are experiencing chemotherapy in a more compromised state, those interactions matter even more, such that if you're a slow metabolizer, you may not be able to receive that therapy whatsoever. It may be just simply toxic. So this type of testing can save your life. Personally, I have tried antacids like Prilosec. It never worked. I had my pharmacogenomic profile done. I'm an ultra-fast metabolizer of it. And so if I up my dose, it suddenly worked. So it was kind of like mystery solved. This is actually something that's very impactful. It's very common for most of us. And in the future, this is going to be part and parcel. Again, the science has been set and solid for 40 years. So it's just a matter of integration. And of course, who pays?
Andrew, I'll come back to you with a question because we've seen AI make some quick wins on the administrative side. And there's probably been debate, uncertainty, skepticism, speculation about how, when, where AI is going to make the biggest impact on the clinical side. Is this the place you're already seeing strides? Is this the place you're seeing health systems make the most bets around AI making a clinical impact?
We see it in pockets. So you could look at something like AI's predictive analytic functions for medical imaging diagnostics and say, well, that's a component of precision medicine efforts, certainly to be able to diagnose something that the human eye is likely to miss and being able to actually predict ultimately what that could mean for that patient's trajectory. I'm thinking about some of the more emerging ideas that are coming out of the lab. And one of those is around AI agent orchestration methods. So this is where we think about some of the gaps that we may have in terms of specialty skill sets or the roles within certain institutions where we could start to see how trained AI agents can actually start to help fill in those roles or automate certain functions. When we think about something like a tumor board and being able to actually build agents that could have specific roles and specialize in different areas to help supplement those decisions when treating cancer or whatever other condition, those are already starting to scale up pretty quickly. There's certainly a bit of hype around the term of agentic AI. It's essentially automating so much more than what we're used to. And there's so many risks that come with that, especially in the clinical space. The use of AI has exploded in such a way that we're seeing so many potential use cases start to hit the road now. I literally this morning was reading out of Stanford that they're piloting something that they're calling CRISPR GPT. It's essentially helping their researchers in terms of their approach to studying gene editing and being able to expedite the process by which they might test different hypotheses in this area. You could just think of all the other GPTs that have started to explode, even if they're just in the research context. But often precision medicine that's where it lives. AI is just going to be another tool in the toolkit for that.
Yeah, Andrew, you're rightfully putting that this is something that has lived and continues to thrive in the research space. Perhaps the biggest impact of AI in precision medicine has been clinical trial assignment, increasing the rapidness of enrollment, which is often a rate-limiting step to a successful trial. That's really been impactful. It might require medical review of a stack of a patient's charts, and now AI can do that in seconds. At least get a much better start. I also can monitor the spectrum of trials. So for smaller centers that might not be quite as aware, it opens up more patient care options than ever before. It's really exciting.
And that's also including aspects of how generative AI is supercharging synthetic data generation to help supplement a lot of those studies. In the case of clinical trial recruitment and matching, it's certainly helping to boost those efforts as well. It makes me also think of something like the concept of digital twins, which is just another concept that's been used for years. And we're trying to see how digital twins can be supplementing some of the research that we're seeing and all the data that could be used to help reduce some of the risk in terms of you're working with essentially a digital model of a patient rather than a real patient. And so there's benefits that come with that as well.
You had mentioned the ability of AI to identify certain trials that patients could participate in. That was a big topic of discussion at the latest American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting in Chicago in late May. The statistic that was thrown around like 5 to 7% of all cancer patients that are eligible for trials actually locate a trial to participate in. Artificial intelligence can be a really great way to help do that busy work to identify patients. If you could do that up front, then an actual person wouldn't need to sort through all of the different medical notes and figure out what trial is the best fit. This just doubles down on what we're hearing a lot more in the cancer space, and it's where to put your efforts in the AI space, because you can't tackle every single AI use case out there. This has really helped frame and help our members think through things, identifying the problem that they're trying to solve for, and then pick the best use case that helps to solve that problem. At the same time, and specifically in the cancer space, it's you want to be able to use AI, but you also don't want to erode the patient experience. That is something that a lot of our cancer programs are thinking through, and how do we make sure we preserve that, especially in higher acuity cases.
All good ones. It seems very clear to me that this is a huge benefit, and I want this kind of care as a patient. From a health system perspective, you're running a service line, you're running strategy team for a health system. How would you think about precision medicine as a growth channel? Justin, you first.
The answer completely depends. Which service line are you the lead of?
You have limited resources. Where are you making your bets?
If you're the CFO, you might want to run because this is going to incur additional costs, at least in the short term. If you're the cancer service line lead, you realize you need to play in precision medicine to provide even the standard care. If you don't, you get to a point, and it's almost like a non-conventional practice. If you don't match patients to a precision medicine, health systems do need to consider where to play. And there is always the option of deselection or wait and see. We continue to hear that folks are actively thinking about it, but perhaps not ready to jump in quite yet. As you progress to other service lines, hematology is certainly an important one, sort of autoimmune and inflammatory conditions, another. Whether or not you want to play inpatient or outpatient, there's a lot of cell and gene therapies that require invasive and inpatient stays. Is that something that you want to play in? In terms of overall impact, this is something that helps differentiate programs, makes them comprehensive, and is clearly more important at academics than non. But non-academics can certainly build this sort of program to compete with the other destination centers. I'm going to give 2 plugs too. If you are considering precision medicine, we have resources to help. Vizient has a cell and gene therapy community that's been enacted, and we can network you with those folks if you're thinking about building a program. It's a great set where you can have peer-to-peer learning. Pharmacy in general will probably leads many of these approaches. And on that accord, the American Society of Hospital Pharmacists just announced a new Center for Next Generation Therapeutics. And they have 3 featured resources, which are really interesting as we think about where pharmacy might lead in the precision medicine space. One is cell and gene therapies. The second is high-cost therapies in general. So think biologic infusions and other really high-cost medicines. And then pharmacogenomics. These are key areas to potentially develop, and it will impact many patients' lives.
I'm going to double down on one of the things that you had said. Health systems really need to view, specifically for the oncology space, precision oncology as a strategic differentiator. And so not something that's going to erode your traditional revenue makers, like what's going to happen in the OR or surgery or whatnot, but really as something that is going to improve the patient experience and outcomes. And this is going to be the shift in how we actually define our value markers. If you don't develop something like this, or like whatever your precision oncology platform is and how you're going to differentiate yourself, potential patients could go somewhere else where they could get those things. This is an important thing to consider.
My send-off for a health system strategy play is very similar to what we say when it comes to digital transformation. There is no end game. There's no finish line. It's the same with precision medicine. It's ultimately just how we do healthcare. And you got to have that long-term orientation. But in the case of digital, because I am always trying to advocate for it, I mean, it's really about exploring all the options on the table. So it could be things that we're fairly used to, like remote monitoring, the use of wearables, the emergence of digital therapeutics, but it could be more of the cutting edge. It could be artificial intelligence, exploring 3D printing, all these other concepts that we've been exploring, but not really fully running towards just yet. But I think ultimately they all collectively form this picture of precision medicine.
Thanks so much for sharing that perspective. Thanks so much for guiding some of our health systems early bets. And thanks as always for joining SG2 Perspectives podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us, and or follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn at SG2 Healthcare. And if you want to talk more about innovative healthcare strategies, you can always email me at sg2perspectives@sg2.com. Finally, SG2 is a Vizient company, and there are a bunch of Vizient podcasts that you might like. You could find them at Vizient /podcasts. Have a great day.